Welcome to Freya's Fairy Tales. We believe fairy tales are both stories we enjoyed as children and something that we can achieve ourselves. Each week, we will talk to authors about their favorite fairy tales when they were kids, and their adventure to holding their very own fairy tale in their hands. At the end of each episode, we will finish off with a fairy tale or short story read as close to the original author's version as possible. I am your host, Freya Victoria. I'm an audiobook narrator that loves reading fairy tales, novels, and bringing stories to life through narration. I am also fascinated by talking to authors and learning about their why and how for creating their stories. We have included all of the links for today's author and our show in the show notes. Be sure to check out our website and sign up for our newsletter for the latest on the podcast. Today is part 1 of 2, where we are talking to Will Gray about his novels. Over the next 2 weeks, you will hear about storytelling as a teenager, starting with being a dungeon master, becoming your character, going from being signed to a publisher to that same publisher teaching you how to do it yourself, promoting yourself, writing and publishing in dyslexia font, plotting an entire world worth of books, and writing the story you want to tell. Dalen Pax and the Beads of Fire. The Chronicle of Time. Dalen Pax and the Beads of Fire is a delightfully inventive fantasy novel, a remarkably touching and insightful coming-of-age story, and a philosophical tour de force. Dalen Pax is a typical high school misfit who has always wished that magic was real. One fateful night, he found that it was when he risked his life to save Matthias, a man he didn't know, a man with the ability to wield real magic. After their meeting, Matthias enlists Dalen to help him retrieve a powerful artifact, known as the Beads of Fire, which connects its wearer to the Fire Djinn, a free-willed divine being that can grant the wish of whoever possesses them. Once Dalen awakens the Fire Djinn, she grants his wish to learn magic and takes him to an enchanted world to teach him the elements of reality, where he will have to know the truth about magic and power. Of course, it turns out that making wishes can be a rather tricky endeavor, and he quickly discovers that there are 2 sides to every coin. The world will need Dalen to be more than he ever imagined or wished he could be. Can he find the truth within himself and believe in who he is and was always meant to be? All right, so the podcast is Freya's Fairy Tales, and that is in 2 ways. Fairy tales are something that we either watched or listened to, having our parents read to us, or read ourselves as kids. And also the journey for you to spend weeks, months, years working on your book to hold that in your hands at the end is a sort of fairy tale for you. So I like to start off with, what was your favorite fairy tale as you were growing up, and did your favorite change as you got older? And that could be short stories too. It's not exclusive to fairy tales.
Sure. Yeah. Originally, when I was very young, my mom gave me a book of original fairy tales. They were the original Hans Christian Andersen Grimm's fairy tales. They were,
Mm-hmm.
not the
Disney
easier
version?
version. Yeah, the Disney version. Um, and out of those, it was probably either the Little Mermaid or the Matchstick Girl, which
Hmm.
were both tragic, terrible stories. But then again, so
Yes.
are most fairy tales.
Yes.
Um, I mean, I can't think of a single fairy tale that everyone was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm glad I'm a part of this story."
I think if you're going to include Aesop's, those all have good
Okay,
endings.
the fables, the Aesop's, yeah, some of them do, but a lot of Aesop's fables are explanations of why not to go that route. You know,
True.
there are, you know, there are a lot of cautionary tales. Even if it's just a bird with a pitcher and water. That's probably one of the only ones I can think of that was just like, "Oh, way to go, bird!" Um, Anyway, my other fairy tales that I grew up with were comic book characters, because a lot of those characters are legends now. They're what legends were, what
Hmm.
Hercules and Perseus were to those people then are what Batman, Superman, Spider-Man are to us now.
Right.
These ideas of powerful, beyond powerful beings who are usually rescuing us, but often are
Hopefully.
just causing more havoc in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at the end of every, if you look at, Marvel movies, at the end of every one of those movies, they've left this gigantic disaster
Yeah,
needs to be cleaned up. Like, how much how much did it cost to repair all the damage?
yeah. You threw someone through a building, like through it. There was
Someone,
people working
some
there.
giant like, look at, like, Godzilla. I mean, you're throwing, like, gigantic monsters through the buildings. So at what age did you start writing? Anything, short stories, your own fables, whatever it was?
Um, well, writing or storytelling, because there is a difference. I started orating stories early.
Okay.
I have been an orator for a long time. And for a long, long time, probably starting all the way back when I was still a teenager in high school, I started being a dungeon master for
Okay.
my friends. Um, it was introduced to us because of a play that we were doing. And they needed to know Dungeons and Dragons terms and be able to say them fluidly. And so we
Mm.
went, fine, we're going to play everyone in the cast. We're going to play a D&D game so you know what's going on. And after that, they're like, ooh, can we keep playing? And so I started orating then, and I created a world. I created my own world and so on and so forth. And every time we'd finish a game, I'd say, okay, 10 years have gone by. We're going to make new characters. Everything that you did happened.
Mhm.
And then I would continue. And I DM'd that one world for 30 years of my real time.
Oh, goodness.
Right. That's the world that my books are written in, is that world.
Oh, gosh.
All right. So I have 30 years of world development. All
Yeah.
right. All right. But the first time I tried to write a story was when I was 22. I using words that they use nowadays, I was in a very, very bad place and tried to unalive myself. All
Okay.
right. It was a really bad moment. But it was also that crystallizing moment where you go, wait a minute, no, I don't want to do this. And my life switched hard. And right then my first character came to mind that I started writing. All right. And I
Well,
tried
hey,
to
that
write
seems like a
his
good way
book.
to pull yourself out there.
It
"Hey, we're
was.
gonna write instead."
Well, it was right instead, but the moral, ethical, spiritual, physical things that he was going through was my therapy to pull me out of where I was.
Mhm.
This was a therapy in many ways, but this character was called Will Gray. That's not my real name. Okay. And when I built this character, I was becoming this character in some
Mhm.
ways. I'm no longer this dark, broken little piece of whatever, right? I am this blossoming human being that is going through this change. And
Mhm.
so at that point, I took the name Will Gray for myself.
Mhm.
And I've been him ever since. So I'm looking down the business into 50. I'm turning 48 this year. And so
Okay.
I've utilized the name Will Gray for that entire time, for more than half my life.
Mhm.
All right. And so when I was doing stuff on YouTube and orating more stories and so on there, I was using the name Will Gray.
Mhm.
And so when I decided to write the book, I'm like, this is how people know me. I may as well go with it.
Right.
And so I went with the author named Will Gray, but the original character that created all of this is in my book as the narrator.
That is
So
I never would have, like, come up with that at all.
right, well, that original character in his story ascended and
Mhm.
left his world,
So
and so I said,
10 years later, like you used to do.
all right, 10 years later, he is now being brought back in as a narrator god.
Mhm.
Right, he is now telling the story. He speaks, therefore the world exists. All right. And so that's why he's the narrator of my stories. And if you look at my cover, it actually says Dalen Pax, The Beads of Fire, as told by Will Gray. It never
Mhm.
says he's the author.
Right.
But I write myself down as the author, Will Gray. So it's that character from my original story that got me writing in the first place and got me out of that dark place is the narrator of my series now.
So, that story that Will Gray was born in, Did you actually, like, write a full book with that or, like
I wrote 2/3 of a book and ran into a serious problem, which is if the movie was made, if the story was told, it
Mhm.
would be told like Across the Universe or Moulin Rouge or Rock of Ages. It's filled with music.
Mm.
All right. And it's not, and it has to be specifically that music. It's that song because a lot of how I was writing, how I still write today, is I'll listen to music. I'll put on a song and let my mind
Mhm.
just create. And when it creates a scene, every now and then it creates a scene. I'll listen to the music. I go, oh, that's a good song. I listen to that song. Oh, this is a great song. I listen to this music. My mind's eye opens up and I go, epic story. I'm like, oh, this must be part of the book. And a lot of the times, me writing my book is me just trying to get from song to song to song
Mhm.
because these are the scenes that I create. And so I utilize I I'm sorry, I got off track. I started
You're
talking.
fine.
What was the initial question?
I think we started with when did
No,
you
no, no. The
start
last thing you
writing?
just said. Why am I telling you this about the songs?
Oh, I was asking, if you ever finished the first book.
Oh yeah. Well, I stopped writing it because I realized I'd have to get the copyrights to all these songs,
Oh, yeah.
right? And there's over 80 songs in the series
So financially not doable for most of the population.
for right now.
Yeah.
And there are songs in the new series that I'm working with, but I cut it down to like one or two. And like for book 3, I'm gonna have to get permission to use the lyrics of a song
Mm.
because these gray members from my original series are now being involved in my story.
Mhm.
And so they still the gray members are actually empathic telepaths. All right. Not only do they send the thought, but they send the feeling.
Okay.
So you can't tell. It's like they can just make you dream something,
With
and
the
so you feel it.
feelings and
You,
everything.
you feel it. You see it. You're there. As
Mhm.
far as you know, there's ghost stories. Terrifying, you know, type of thing. All right, but they use it for healing as well, and they can
Mhm.
use a song to have you go through this meaning
Mhm.
that helps you go through. And I those characters are now showing up in my series, but not until book 3, really. I mean, the narrator is there; he's there from the
Right.
beginning, but the others start showing up around 3.
So now right now, the first one that you published that's actually, like, published now, when did you start writing that one, and how long did that one take you to write?
I started writing it about 3.5, 4 years ago at this
Okay.
point, but it only took me 8 months to write it.
Okay.
9 months to write it initially. The maybe draft it, edit it, edit it again. Okay, now it's ready for another person to look at.
Yeah.
uh was about 9 to 10 months, and I drafted all 7 books of the series. I now put one out. I can now write and draft an entire book in about 3 months.
Okay. That's
All
before
right.
the editing part in 3 months, right?
Well, I can draft it, go back through it and edit it, go back one more time and read it out loud to myself,
Mhm.
and go, okay, it sounds right to me. All right. But I'm dyslexic and I'm also slightly neurodivergent. I'm on the spectrum for autism. And so I will read it 8 times and go, yeah, that sounds right. And then I'll hand it over to someone. They're like, what are you doing? I don't, you know, like for
So
example, there's no difference for me from saying there was no up, there was no down, and saying there was no down, there was no up.
mhm,
But when people talk about it, there's no up or down, they always say up first.
mhm.
I wrote there's no down or up. And my editor went, that doesn't sound right. You need to switch it, you know?
So as an author, my debut is coming out in November. But literally
Right on.
today, like 20 minutes before we got on this, I was going through my last beta reader's comments. I still have to finish when we get off of this. And there was a lot of that. I'm like, it made sense in my head when I wrote it. And she'd be like, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, I don't know. What are melting snow water temperatures? I'm like, it's the temperature the water gets when the snow melts into it. Duh.
Right? What does it sound like?
I'm like, it made sense when I wrote it, okay?
Yeah, yeah. There's been only a couple places that my editor will go, "What does this mean?" And I'll read it and go, "What does that mean?" You
Let
know,
me let me read it in context and
yeah,
figure
yeah.
it
Let me read the two paragraphs before it. Oh, okay, I know what I was trying to say here,
out.
which has been very helpful in book two. I lost my editor, right, 5 weeks before everything was due. They
Oh
went, "I don't
no.
have time to do this."
Oh no.
You know, um, she is a teacher. She was busy throughout the school year, was going to
Mm,
try to get it done during her summer break, but then power of blah, all these different things happened, and so on and so forth. And she was just like, "Oh, I am not going to be able to get it done."
mm-hmm.
But it was 5 weeks before it was due,
Right.
right? And her husband, who was my illustrator, also then went, "I'm going to go with her because all of the reasons that she can't do it right now, I can't do it right now either."
Right.
Right. And so we were like, "Oh, now we don't have an editor or an illustrator."
Mm-hmm. In 5 weeks to go.
Oh, right. And 5 weeks to go. So there was a panic. But in the end, my wife was my editor. And the advantage of that was that my editor was sitting there right next to me and she could just, on anything, go, "Hey, what do you mean by this?"
Mm-hmm.
And then I would get up and I would act it out. I'm like, "He went like this, you know, or whatever." And she's like, "Oh, right, right. Oh, okay. I know what you're doing. Okay, cool." And then she would
Fix
turn
it.
it so that everyone can understand it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I would read it and still go, "Nope, that makes sense to me." And then she edit it for 15 minutes and then read it back to me. I went, "Isn't that what I said?" And
Well,
she's like,
no.
"No, no, that is not what you said at all."
So you get it. You said it took you about 8 months to write it and then another 8-ish months to get it edited and ready to go for the first one. Then what did you kind of do after that? You
Well,
put
initially, I
you
was trying to look at agents at first. This
okay.
was my first book. I had no knowledge of indie publishing. I had no idea about any of this. And so, right, you write a book. The next stage, you go get an agent. The agent
Mhm.
goes does the thing. And so I took a couple of workshops with agent. There was an agency that was doing workshops on how to
Okay.
get agents and so on and so forth. And so I took theirs. They gave me some really good information, some really useful pieces of information that I needed. Things like, look, it's your art. You can do art all day. And if you want to do art for the rest of your life, that's great. And it's perfect the way that it is. But if you want a marketable product, you're going to have to accept the point that we're going to have to make some changes on this.
Mhm.
And if you can't let go of your art, then be an artist. But
Mhm.
if you want to make a marketable product that you can sell as a book, you're
And
going to
that
have
would
to let
be
us put
I hate some of the terminology because, like, marketable product, marketable to who?
right to the main public,
Yeah,
right?
to the
And
masses, to the store owners of the books, the big bookstores that we're used to being able to get our books into. That's who you're marketing to is the CEOs or the not CEOs. Let's be real.
right,
CEO of Barnes and Noble is not reading and picking books, but the people in charge of picking the books at Barnes and Noble to go on the shelves.
right, yes, yes. The behind the scenes shadow government that runs Barnes
Yeah,
and Noble,
yeah,
right?
those ones.
Those guys, yeah. Well, right. Well, this is one of the greatest things that I learned. All right, because then I was published. I got an indie publisher who picked me up, and they're like, "Look, we're gonna do this," and then pandemic hit,
Mhm.
and they became ill, not from the pandemic. They also had cancer, type thing. And what they had, they realized is that they couldn't keep working the way that they were. They needed to change their
Mm.
profession, and they moved from being a publisher to someone who builds the book. You hand them a manuscript, they go, "Here you go," and they hand you a book ready to be published. All right. They do the illustrations. They build the table of contents. They get the ISBN numbers. They get all of the legal information. They
So
get the
without
cover set.
without any input from you.
Well, no, with input from me. I mean, I
Okay.
can, it'd be like working with an illustrator. This was an artist who was taking my manuscript and putting it into book form.
Mhm.
And if need be, getting an illustrator. Do you want an illustrator? Okay, and they would work with you. But
Mhm.
basically, all of the work that she was doing as a publisher and not getting paid for it, and then her clientele were not going to their book readings, and not they wanted to sit back and just, why aren't I famous yet?
Yeah.
And so she couldn't make her money back. And
Right.
so she was changing her job to, all the things that I did to get your book ready, you pay me for that. Now, good luck. And I wish you, I'm no longer a publisher, all right, type of thing. And so I was like, okay, but where does that leave me? Because you just picked me up as a client. And
Mhm.
she went, I'm going to set you up on the first book, right? You don't need to pay me. We've already had a deal. I'm going to honor that. I'm going to set you up for book one. All right. And then you'll become a client for book two, three, four, five, whatever.
Mhm.
But I'm also going to teach you how to become your own publisher.
Okay.
All right. And so she
Um,
taught me how to get an LLC. And the Way of Great Publishing is my company.
mhm.
All right. And she taught me how to do that. She taught me how to find out certain pieces of information, everything from what percentages should be used for getting into bookstores comparatively to doing the book fairs and so on and so forth, to how to find illustrators, how to get mass amounts of books printed all at once.
Mhm.
She's helping me learn how to become an indie publisher.
Mhm.
And so that process took up 3 years. I mean, together, from the time I started writing to the time I was ready to publish my own book, was 3 years. And that was a year ago when I put out Dalen Pax and the Beats of Fire.
Okay. So that's I mean, I've got to say though, as for you, that worked out way in your favor for like indie publishing to have someone teach you how to do all of that. Where like
Yes.
most people are floundering around just googling all the answers. So
Yeah. Yeah. I was very lucky on that.
so you put the book did she end up publishing book 1 for you or did you end up doing that one yourself?
The book one is published by the Way of Gray Publishing, which is my company.
Okay, so you ended up doing that one yourself.
Yeah. She helped me go through the entire process of how to do this. And she's also there helping me as a coach while I'm preparing number two. I talked to
Okay.
her earlier today. I was just like, "Oh, okay, Tanya, all right, the book is done. Ngram has gone. Hey, it's ready. What do you want to do with it? How do I get a PDF version to do a visual proof on it before we say, all right, put it to distribution?"
Mhm.
All right. She was helping me with that specifically today. You know, so I was very fortunate. But I have been very, very fortunate through a lot of this,
Mhm.
in the respect that um, my original editor was one of those kids from high school who helped, that
Develop the characters.
right, that there was one of the original members of the game when
Mhm.
my world started, is now an English teacher. And she went, "Oh, let me edit your book."
Mhm.
And so I had a free editor,
Right.
you know, but it was just happenstance that it worked out that way. All right.
Mhm.
I completely different world I live in now. All right. That was just I live in a different world now where we're like, oh, can we afford to buy books for the signing?
Yeah,
You
so
know,
for me, for mine, so I started narrating in September of 21, and then in January of 22 is when I landed my first fiction book. So I did all nonfiction prior to January of last year. And so I started this podcast in not August, April of 22. And so I've been like talking to all these authors that write these fiction books that I narrate. I've been talking to authors on here and I've slowly been like absorbing all of the information. Now some of it won't apply to me and won't help me because of the way my brain works, but all these people's writing processes and how they promote the books and how they found their editors and I don't need illustrations for mine, but I've talked to a couple children's authors that had to find illustrators for their books and like all these things and I'm like slowly absorbing. So I'm like I told the the author that I narrated for that is now going to be my editor, I told her, I was like, "The podcast was really selfish. It was just so I could learn the business as I was working on my book."
I know,
And it's worked
great idea.
great,
I should do
so
one myself. I think it's a great idea. Yeah,
so
every time you
you
have a question, you just have someone on and ask them the question. Hey, how did you do this?
Well, that's why I'm like, I cover everything from fairy tale that you like as a kid to next question for you would be, so a year ago, you put your book out in there in the world. What did you do to sell the book at that point?
Well, a couple things locally.
Mhm.
Um, we have a farmers market that we do that this happens every Sunday, and its rules suggest that anytime that the product that you are trying to sell is at least 65% yours, you made it. You can sell it at this farmer market. It's in a parking lot at the mall, right? But a big
Okay.
farmers market, they sell everything from vegetables to soaps to whatever. And I can put up a 10 by 10 booth there and sit there and sell my books. All right. I am learning about book cons. I am
Mhm.
learning about, I mean, even some of them, the book cons, comic cons, fantasy cons, dragon con,
There's so
anything.
many. So
There's
many.
so many. And part of the problem for in the beginning during this last year, it's people I'm on TikTok and then I get 8 different people that I'm following go, oh dude, Dragon Con was so cool. I'm like, there was a
Mhm.
Dragon Con? Shoot. You know, so the thing that I'm learning right now is how to find out about these cons,
Mhm.
about right. And sometimes it's a Google search. Sometimes it's like
Yeah.
book cons or fantasy cons within the general location of where I'm at because I am not rich enough or nor am I selling enough books to go out to Atlanta, Georgia to do a thing yet because I'm in California, right? But in
Yeah.
November, there's one in San Francisco in
Mhm.
November, all right? I'm going to that one,
Mhm.
because it's close enough that I can get to it. I can drive there.
Right, right.
Right. But I had to learn how to find out about it. I had to go, where are they? When are they?
Yeah.
Also, I because my distributor is Ngram, all right, and I know that there's a lot of trouble with Ngram right now because they changed prices and did things and so on.
Mhm.
But they also distribute your book to like 10,000 different locations, and they have 7 printing houses all over the world, and you can just it's so much easier to get your book out. I sold 3 books in France, one in Germany.
Yeah.
Cool, right on. I didn't, sweet. Well, I don't know how that happened, but it did, right? And it's in the online Walmart,
Mhm.
right? And it's in Barnes and Nobles online, and it's on
Mhm.
it, and automatically gets put into Amazon. And because of that, I can when I went to Barnes and Nobles. And I'm like, hi, look, I am an author that uses your distributor and Graham Spark. They're like, oh, that's great. you know.
Mhm.
Um, and if you look me up, I'm in your system. And they did. I'm in your system. I'm
Mhm.
like, great. Now, how do I go from in your system to on your shelves?
Mhm.
Because I was already in their system, it made it easy.
Mhm.
Right? They asked me, do you have any sort of social media? Well, yes, I have TikTok and I have Facebook and I do it. I have so many followers on this and so many followers on that. And my followers on TikTok rise every day. And they're like,
Yeah.
wonderful. That's great. Are you doing what else are you doing to promote your book? Well, I had also done 2 signings. I went into Half Price Books, which is a used bookstore,
Mhm.
but I'm in their system because of Ingram.
Mhm.
And I got them to have me do a signing there. And I was selling brand new books at the half price bookstore, but I sold a bunch. And so I gave Barnes and Noble these numbers. So I'm doing signings, I'm doing the farmers market. All right, I know it sounds dumb, but I did the farmers market. I've talked to the local libraries. You go, hey, you
Yeah.
doing any book things? All right. And I've done, and I have TikTok, I have this and that. They're like, okay, so you actually trying to promote yourself.
Mhm.
I was like, yeah, and they acted like they had never seen this before. They're like, that is so refreshing to see an author who is actually trying to promote themselves in
Well,
any
look
way,
at
shape, or
why
form.
your publisher stopped doing what she was doing because they weren't doing that.
Right. It's beyond me. why aren't you doing this? My publisher said, look, I'm a publisher, not a publicist.
Yeah.
It's your job to be your publicist. And if you don't want to be a publicist, hire somebody.
Right.
Right. But it's not my job to sell your book. It's my job to make your book. It's my job to publish your book, not advertise it. That's your job,
Yeah.
you know? And where I was like, really? I didn't realize that was the full case, because I thought that's part of the reason why traditional publishers get people is because going through traditional publishing, they have their name recognition, they have millions of dollars of advertising they put into certain things, and so on and so forth. That's the reason why people go the traditional route.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not true for self-publishing or indie publishing.
Well, and so I have talked to both traditionally, all traditionally indie published and self-published. I have talked to all three groups of people on this podcast. And from what I have learned, TradPub, Big Five, TradPub will only put money behind known authors. Stephen King, um, I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head, but like the authors that they know, this author's going to sell books. All we have to do is put 100 copies into this Barnes and Noble and they will sell out because it is such a well-known author. Where if you are, random person with your first book, they don't know what you're gonna do. So
Yeah. Well, and yeah, and so there's a part of me that goes, as a new publisher, as a new author, why go that route? And I personally have not yet found a proper answer. I mean, the answer is because millions of people will see your book.
well, and there's and I'm sure you've seen this on TikTok, the whole like, oh, indie or self-publishing you're not a real author. And it's just like it's because there's a big group of like 10 years ago, because I've read a lot of indie and self-published stuff, okay? And so like 10 years ago, all you had to do, especially if you were in romance or fantasy genre, write the book, put it out there. It doesn't have to be edited. It doesn't have to be anything. Just write the book, put it out there. People will read it, because there weren't enough people writing in that genre for the massive quantity of reading that those genre readers do. And nowadays, there's a whole lot of authors that know you got to get it edited and you got to do this, and they're making sure that the book is polished as much as possible. But 10 years ago, it got a bad name in the industry because people were just first draft throwing that one out into the world and people were reading
No,
it.
don't do that.
So I'm like, for my stuff, I'm like, this is the path that I'm going to take. I'm going to self-publish and do this and that and whatever. But like for Alex, I'm like, if you want to go, my husband, for podcasters that may not know, um, for him, I'm like, if you want to go query, you're a grown adult. You can go do whatever you want to do with your book. It's your book. So we both own our own LLCs already. When it was tax time, we had our accountant get those set up for us because I didn't want to have to figure out how to do that. So he set them up for us. And we each have our own LLC. We'll publish our own books under our own LLCs. We picked the names of and make it all legit. But both of us know editors. I am just now finishing up with beta readers on mine. Then it goes to the editor. Then it'll go to ARC readers. I did pay someone to help me build an ARC team because my team was not building very fast. And I know what's the fastest way to spread the word for more people to be spreading the word. So
I may want to talk to you eventually about who did you talk to about this, because I did everything I could to get ARC readers,
mhm.
and I end up with like 15. All
Yeah,
right.
I think on my own I got like 10. Because
Yeah,
I
I mean,
started
so
before
yeah,
I
that's
brought
on my
someone
own.
on.
I did the best I could, you know,
Yeah.
and that's going. But for some reason, I'm getting a lot of views, but not a lot of traction, like in
Mhm.
TikTok. Like I'll put out a video, and within an hour, I have 280 views,
Mhm.
and two
Same.
people liked it.
Yeah, I think the last time they reset the algorithm, I think they decided to disregard hashtags is what I think. I'm pretty sure is
But
what
what's the
happened.
point of? Oh, okay,
That's
all
what
right.
I'm pretty sure that's what happened with the last reset. I think they messed up the hashtag getting it to the right people thing. Which just
Yeah,
means you
'cause
gotta wait
I
for an update that fixes it, but you gotta wait for an update that fixes it.
yeah, just yesterday, someone said, "Look, I found your stuff. I thought that you had stopped putting out material
Mhm.
because I haven't seen any of your stuff for 3 weeks." And I happened to go onto your account. I'm like, "Oh my god, there's a whole bunch of stuff here." All right, and the reason why is because that she started watching like 4 or 5 other people, and so it only feed them that.
Mhm.
And it's like, I worked really hard to get my 1,000 followers. All
Mhm.
right. I plugged in, and I finally did a couple of reader follow parties and so on and so forth to get myself over the line.
Mhm.
But most of my followers are followers.
Mhm.
They liked what I put out. They went, "Oh yes, this guy, I want to hear more." Yet only 200 people see it, and for some reason only like 4 people like it. I'm
See,
like, "Oh, what am I not doing to have this hit right?" So I'm looking at other avenues besides TikTok, for example, and then nothing against TikTok. I'm not bad mouthing TikTok in any way, shape, or form
mhm.
in the public media. No, 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 no. But
Right.
for example, my books are written in dyslexia font.
Mhm.
All right, it's a special font made to help people who have dyslexia. I'm dyslexic. My daughter's dyslexic. When I first found out about it, I'm like, why would you not write a book in this font? Because even if you don't have dyslexia, this font removes reader's fatigue. Your eyes don't get tired after reading 100 pages.
Mhm.
All right. And so I'm like, why would you not write it? So I'm only producing books in that font. I'll never use New Roman Times. I'll never use it. All
Mhm.
right. And so the reason why book 2 and book 1 came out in October is because it's Dyslexic Awareness Month.
Mhm.
Now, my goal to try to connect with people for the signing that I have set up at Barnes and Nobles, because I went in and went, "Hey, let's set this up for my book for book 1."
Mhm.
And they put books on the shelves. Those sold out. They had to buy more. And I'm
That's
like,
always
"Let's do a
good. That's a good
yeah, let's
problem.
do a signing." And they're like, "Let's do a signing in October because it's Dyslexic Awareness Month. It will be better for you."
Mhm.
All right. And I'm like, fair enough. But since then, book 2 is coming out. So I timed book 2 to come out right then.
Mhm.
All right. But I'm on my own, not because of what Barnes and Noble's doing, not because of TikTok, but not because of anything like that. I'm going to be setting up PR packages and connecting to my local television, Good Morning Sacramento type of thing,
Mhm.
you know, and saying, all right, just as October hits, hey, are you looking for dyslexic awareness month stories? Because I am a publisher who only is publishing in dyslexia font for dyslexic readers. Do you want
Mhm.
a story? And then when they're, oh, yeah, yeah, we'd like to at least interview you and talk to you, man. And blah, 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 blah. By the way, I'm doing my next book is launching on this date. It's going to I'm going to be doing a signing in Barnes and Nobles, blah, 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 blah. All right.
Mhm.
And I am doing my own self promotion and using other formats than TikTok, because I seem to not be able to get any traction, no matter how hard I try. I mean, I know people who have been on just as long as I have, and they have 28,000 people,
Oh,
and they
it drives me crazy when I see those
yeah,
ones. I'm like, I've worked hard for I think I'm at 2,300 now, and I'm like, I've been working hard since January of last year to build up the Freya Victorian name.
right. But people
But
like DS
but I did
Diamante,
start across all social medias at once, and TikTok is just the only one that has done anything until
mhm,
now. Until now, I don't know if you saw it, but I did post a video yesterday. I had someone message me on the podcast account on Instagram yesterday, and they asked me all these questions that are in my bio on Instagram for the podcast, and they're asking me the answers to these questions, and I'm like, "Did you read the bio?"
did you do
It
anything
I'm
whatsoever? Yeah.
like or did you see book? Because what they did, They messaged me and they asked if I needed any audiobook narrators for my books. And I'm like, you're messaging a podcast. I was in a spicy mood yesterday, okay? So my first response, you're messaging a podcast that interviews authors where the host is a professional audiobook narrator and you're asking about narrating books that aren't mine. I'm like, does any of this make sense to you? And they were like, oh, well, something, something, something. Oh, well, if your host is ever busy, we also help make podcasts, take your written content and turn. I'm like, it's an interview-based podcast. If the host is unavailable, there is no podcast. Like, so finally, after all of that, they were like, oh, really? I have a podcast too. Here's my podcast. And they send me the link to their podcast. What's the name of yours? And I'm like, you're messaging me on the podcast page. So finally I was like, listen, we will never work together, but for your future business transactions, I would highly recommend you spend the 1 minute it will take you to read the limited Instagram bio before you message someone. Because
I had
I'm
someone
like,
hitting me like that too.
I'm like and anyone listening to this, do not, whether you're the person that they're trying to sell to or the person trying to do the selling, 9 times out of 10, if you took even just 2 minutes to do any kind of research on the person you're trying to sell to, and it should be quite clear if you're the author or the podcast that is trying, getting these unsolicited messages, it should be obvious if they did not even do any kind of research on you at all.
Yeah, I just had that happen to me on Facebook. Someone ran in, hey, I really enjoyed your material, and I thought that perhaps we might be able to help you. We do things to webinars and podcasts and so on and so forth, type of thing. If to get set up, maybe you may already have your own product, but we'd like to at least show you what we have, and if it's better than what you're doing, then maybe we can set something up. How would you like to do a free, communication? And I was like, possibly. I definitely know that if I'm going to be doing anything, if I'm going to buy anything, I'm going to have the rest of my team here, mainly my wife. But
right. Let me talk to the boss real quick.
yeah. Well, momentarily, there's 2.5 of us, and for Way of Grade, I have one person who's helping me with marketing as well. And he's helping me with marketing visuals. He's done some of the artwork and so on and so forth to help prepare the new covers and so on and so forth. And he's one of those people that if Way of Grade Publishing ever picks up enough where we can really be something other than just I'm putting out my books, right? He will be a member of this team, right? But right now we're just putting out mine,
right.
But I said, okay, but if you don't mind, I want the rest of my team there for the thing. By the way, what of my material did you like that had you talk to me? And they
don't have an answer.
And they're like, oh, well, here's where you can set up to do where we can meet. And so I ignored it. And just the other day, they're like, I don't understand. You showed interest in what we were doing, and then you never communicated with
me. Yeah.
I was like, you were so close. You almost made it, because I was interested in some of what you're doing. What you're offering, I'm kind of interested in, but no, sorry. And it's because they didn't take the time to actually know the information. That was just like you. If you're going to try to sell me something and start off with going, I really like the content that you're putting out, you better be ready to answer stuff about my content.
Right.
Because if you did look at my stuff, because for 3 years before I started writing, I was an orator on Facebook. All right. I was doing self-help. I was doing some spirituality stuff, but not nothing like that. It was just, are you feeling a connection? Or, why is it not? And so I was trying to help the best I could in those areas. And that's what they were suggesting, because I was doing hour-long videos almost every day. talking about certain aspects of philosophy and
Mhm.
hey, you got to get up and you got to, if you're waiting for someone to save you, that person's you,
Right.
type of message that I was putting out for years. And I'm like, well, it'd be fun to do possibly a webinar or something like that on that subject. I have a lot of information and I could use it,
Mhm.
but they never got back to me on it. And so instead, I decided to put it in my book. um, and I did. There is actually a lot of philosophy in my series, and there's a lot of ideas about connection and how it works and why it works the way that it works, and so on and so forth. And I use it to explain magic, with big
Mhm.
quotations around it. It's magic, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, 7/10 of book one is the protagonist learning the different elements of magic. you
Mhm.
know but there's a difference between magic of the body, magic of the mind, and magic of the soul. There's different formats that it runs, but it's all the same stuff. Blah
Mhm.
blah 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 is a lot of what the first book is about. you
Mhm.
know and part of the reason why is because I didn't want to have to spend explanation after explanation through the rest of the 7 book series. I want to go, look, let me lay down the foundation. Let me explain to you how this stuff works. This is what it is. This is why it works the way that it works in my magical world. This is why magic is. Okay, now that you know it, I can just go, he used his magic. All right. He magically did this. And I don't have to explain to you how. Or right? Because if you read the first book, you know how, you know,
Mhm.
type
Or
of
you can
thing.
throw like a little one sentence explanation very quickly
Oh
and
yeah.
be done
Right.
instead
Right. I
of
mean, yeah, I mean, I don't just go, he magic. Um, but like I separate the 3 spheres of magic is the body, mind, and soul,
Mhm.
right? But um, in book two, book three, book four, I'll say Dalen Pax opened up the body sphere and blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
Well, if you haven't read book one, you have no idea what the body sphere is.
Right.
Right. So I never suggest to anyone to read these books out of order.
Which is why
Right.
when
Don't
I'm
just want
like
to pick.
I'm promoting mine. That there are authors are very specific about these are standalones. It is a series of standalones. I'm very specific with mine. I'm like it will be interconnected standalones. They are each book focuses on a different fairy tale, but you cannot read them out of order. You're not going to know what the heck is going on for the overarching storyline of the series.
Right.
Well liked original fairy tales growing up after he was given Grimm's fairy tales and Hans Christian Andersen's. Today, we'll be reading The Golden Bird by the Grimm brothers. The Golden Bird is a fairy tale collected by the brothers Grimm about the pursuit of a golden bird by a gardener's 3 sons. It is classified in the Arne Thompson Uther Index as type ATU 550, bird, horse, and princess, a folktale type that involves supernatural helper, animal as helper. Other tales of this type include The Bird Grip, The Greek Princess and the Young Gardener, Jarvich Ivan, The Firebird and the Grey Wolf, How Ian Diarich Got the Blue Falcon, and The Nunda Eater of People. Don't forget, we're reading Les Morts d'Arthur, the story of King Arthur and of his noble knights of the Round Table on our Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. The Golden Bird. A certain king had a beautiful garden, and in the garden stood a tree which bore golden apples. These apples were always counted, and about the time when they began to grow ripe, it was found that every night one of them was gone. The king became very angry at this and ordered the gardener to keep watch all night under the tree. The gardener set his eldest son to watch. But about 12 o'clock he fell asleep, and in the morning another of the apples was missing. Then the second son was ordered to watch, and at midnight he too fell asleep, and in the morning another apple was gone. Then the third son offered to keep watch. But the gardener at first would not let him, for fear some harm should come to him. However, at last he consented, and the young man laid himself under the tree to watch. As the clock struck 12, he heard a rustling noise in the air, and a bird came flying that was of pure gold. And as it was snapping at one of the apples with its beak, the gardener's son jumped up and shot an arrow at it. But the arrow did the bird no harm. Only it dropped a golden feather from its tail and then flew away. The golden feather was brought to the king in the morning, and all the council was called together. Everyone agreed that it was worth more than all the wealth of the kingdom, but the king said, "One feather is of no use to me. I must have the whole bird." Then the gardener's eldest son set out, and thought to find the golden bird very easily. And when he had gone but a little way, he came to a wood, and by the side of the wood he saw a fox sitting. So he took his bow and made ready to shoot at it. Then the fox said, "Do not shoot me, for I will give you good counsel. I know what your business is, and that you want to find the golden bird. You'll reach a village in the evening, and when you get there you will see two inns opposite to each other, one of which is very pleasant and beautiful to look at. Go not in there, but rest for the night in the other, though it may appear to you to be very poor and mean." But the son thought to himself, "What can such a beast as this know about the matter?" So he shot his arrow at the fox, but he missed it, and it set its tail above its back and ran into the wood. Then he went his way. And in the evening came to the village where the two inns were, and in one of these were people singing and dancing and feasting. But the other looked very dirty and poor. "I should be very silly," said he, "if I went to that shabby house and left this charming place." So he went into the smart house and ate and drank at his ease, and forgot the bird and his country too. Time passed on, and as the eldest son did not come back, and no tidings were heard of him, the second son set out, and the same thing happened to him. He met the fox, who gave him the good advice. But when he came to the two inns, his eldest brother was standing at the window where the merrymaking was, and called to him to come in. And he could not withstand the temptation, but went in, and forgot the golden bird and his country in the same manner. Time passed on again, and the youngest son too wished to set out into the wide world, to seek for the golden bird. But his father would not listen to it for a long while, for he was very fond of his son and was afraid that some ill luck might happen to him also, and prevent his coming back. However, at last it was agreed he should go, for he would not rest at home, and as he came to the wood, he met the fox, and heard the same good counsel. But he was thankful to the fox, and did not attempt his life as his brothers had done. So the fox said, "Sit upon my tail, and you will travel faster." So he sat down, and the fox began to run, and away they went over stock and stone so quick that their hair whistled in the wind. When they came to the village, the son followed the fox's counsel, and without looking about him, went to the shabby inn and rested there all night at his ease. In the morning came the fox again, and met him as he was beginning his journey, and said, "Go straight forward till you come to a castle, before which lie a whole troop of soldiers fast asleep and snoring. Take no notice of them, but go into the castle and pass on and on till you come to a room, where the golden bird sits in a wooden cage. Close by it stands a beautiful golden cage. But do not try to take the bird out of the shabby cage and put it into the handsome one, otherwise you will repent it." Then the fox stretched out his tail again, and the young man sat himself down, and away they went over stock and stone till their hair whistled in the wind. Before the castle gate, all was as the fox had said. So the son went in and found the chamber where the golden bird hung in a wooden cage, and below stood the golden cage, and the 3 golden apples that had been lost were lying close by it. Then thought he to himself, "It'll be a very droll thing to bring away such a fine bird in this shabby cage." So he opened the door and took hold of it and put it into the golden cage. But the bird set up such a loud scream that all the soldiers awoke, and they took him prisoner and carried him before the king. The next morning the court sat to judge him, and when all was heard, it sentenced him to die unless he should bring the king the golden horse which could run as swiftly as the wind. And if he did this, he was to have the golden bird given him for his own. So he set out once more on his journey, sighing and in great despair, when on a sudden his friend the fox met him and said, "You see now what has happened on account of you not listening to my counsel. I will still, however, tell you how to find the golden horse if you do as I bid you. So you must go straight on till you come to the castle where the horse stands in his stall. By his side will lay the groom fast asleep and snoring. Take away the horse quietly. But be sure to put the old leathern saddle upon him, and not the golden one that is close by it." Then the son sat down on the fox's tail, and away they went over stock and stone till their hair whistled in the wind. All went right, and the groom lay snoring with his hand upon the golden saddle. But when the son looked at the horse, he thought it a great pity to put the leathern saddle upon it. "I will give him the good one," said he. "I'm sure he deserves it." As he took up the golden saddle, the groom awoke and cried out so loud that all the guards ran in and took him prisoner. And in the morning he was again brought before the court to be judged, and was sentenced to die. But it was agreed that if he could bring thither the beautiful princess, he should live, and have the bird and the horse given him for his own. Then he went his way very sorrowful. But the old fox came and said, "Why did you not listen to me? If you had, you would have carried away both the bird and the horse. Yet will I once more give you counsel. Go straight on, and in the evening you will arrive at a castle. At 12 o'clock at night, the princess goes to the bathing house. Go up to her and give her a kiss, and she will let you lead her away. But take care you do not suffer her to go and take leave of her father and mother." Then the fox stretched out his tail, and so away they went over stock and stone, till their hair whistled again. As they came to the castle, all was as the fox had said, and at 12 o'clock the young man met the princess going to the bath and gave her the kiss, and she agreed to run away with him, but begged with many tears that he would let her take leave of her father. At first he refused, but she wept still more, and fell at his feet till at last he consented. But the moment she came to her father's house, the guards awoke, and he was taken prisoner again. Then he was brought before the king, and the king said, "You shall never have my daughter unless in 8 days you dig away the hill that stops the view from my window." Now this hill was so big that the whole world could not take it away. And when he had worked for 7 days and had done very little, the fox came and said, "Lie down and go to sleep, and I will work for you." And in the morning he awoke, and the hill was gone. So he went merrily to the king and told him that now it was removed, he must give him the princess. And the king was obliged to keep his word. And away went the young man and the princess, and the fox came and said to him, "We will have all three, the princess, the horse, and the bird." "Ah," said the young man, "that would be a great thing. But how can you contrive it?" "If you will only listen," said the fox, "it can be done. When you come to the king and he asks for the beautiful princess, you must say, 'Here she is.' Then he'll be very joyful, and you will mount the golden horse that they are to give you, and put out your hand to take leave of them, but shake hands with the princess last. Then lift her quickly onto the horse behind you, clap your spurs to his side, and gallop away as fast as you can." All went right. Then the fox said, "When you come to the castle where the bird is, I will stay with the princess at the door, and you will ride in and speak to the king. And when he sees that it is the right horse, he will bring out the bird, but you must sit still and say that you want to look at it, to see whether it is the true golden bird. And when you get it into your hand, ride away." This too happened as the fox said. They carried off the bird. The princess mounted again, and they rode on to a great wood. Then the fox came and said, "Pray kill me and cut off my head and my feet." But the young man refused to do it, so the fox said, "I will at any rate give you good counsel. Beware of 2 things, ransom no one from the gallows, and sit by the side of no river." And away he went. "Well," thought the young man, "it is no hard matter to keep to that advice." He rode on with the princess till at last he came to the village where he had left his 2 brothers. And there he heard a great noise and uproar, and when he asked what was the matter, the people said, "2 men are going to be hanged." As he came nearer, he saw that the 2 men were his brothers who had turned robbers, so he said, "Cannot they in any way be saved?" But the people said no, unless he would bestow all his money upon the rascals and buy their liberty. Then he did not stay to think about the matter, but paid what was asked, and his brothers were given up and went on with him towards their home. And as they came to the wood where the fox first met them, it was so cool and pleasant that the 2 brothers said, "Let us sit down by the side of the river and rest a while to eat and drink." So he said yes, and forgot the fox's counsel and sat down on the side of the river. And while he suspected nothing, they came behind and threw him down the bank and took the princess, the horse, and the bird, and went home to the king their master and said, All this we won by our labor. Then there was great rejoicing made. But the horse would not eat, the bird would not sing, and the princess wept. The youngest son fell to the bottom of the river's bed. Luckily, it was nearly dry, but his bones were almost broken, and the bank was so steep that he could find no way to get out. Then the old fox came once more and scolded him for not following his advice. Otherwise, no evil would have befallen him. Yet, said he, I cannot leave you here, so lay hold of my tail and hold fast. Then he pulled him out of the river and said to him as he got upon the bank, Your brothers have set watch to kill you, if they find you in the kingdom. So he dressed himself as a poor man and came secretly to the king's court, and was scarcely within the doors when the horse began to eat and the bird to sing, and the princess left off weeping. Then he went to the king and told him all his brother's roguery, and they were seized and punished, and he had the princess given to him again. And after the king's death, he was heir to his kingdom. A long while after, he went to walk one day in the wood, and the old fox met him and besought him with tears in his eyes to kill him, and cut off his head and feet. And at last he did so. And in a moment the fox was changed into a man, and turned out to be the brother of the princess who had been lost a great many, many years. Thank you for joining Freya's Fairy Tales. Be sure to come back next week for the conclusion of Will's journey to holding his own fairy tale in his hands, and to hear another of his favorite fairy tales.